Council will move to items of old business, the first of which is the second final reading of ordinance number 19-2018. This was an ordinance to change the zoning classification of properties owned by Southside Baptist Church located on Main Street from R12 to C2. In that regard,
no
additional information. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. The floor is open for discussion. Questions? Comments? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert, Mayor Danner.
Yes. In our second and final item of old business, it is the second and final reading of ordinance number 24-2018. This is the City of Greer budget ordinance fiscal year 2018-19. This is an ordinance relating to the fiscal affairs of the City of Greer, South Carolina, making appropriations therefore, levying taxes, and to provide for an effective date. We were brought information on our first reading. Hopefully you have had a chance to review the budget. Administrator will give us an overview and update of any additional information or changes we may need to be aware of, and we will go from there. For the purpose of discussion, I will entertain a motion. Or do you anticipate that we're going to need to do any addendums or changes to ordinance 24-2018?
Not from us.
Not from you.
Not from
Okay.
staff.
With that, then we will open the floor for this. Let's just go ahead and do the information first, and then we'll do the reading and open the floor for discussion.
Gladly. Departments are represented here this evening, obviously our finance department and myself, to answer any questions you have relative to any of the line items or any of the priorities of the budget. The budget ordinance that's before you this evening is the exact same document that you saw on first reading, no modifications to the ordinance in its entirety. You will note on the comprehensive fee schedule that those items that are changes are those that are in bold underline, which is how we would handle any ordinance. Anything that is being taken from that item is a strike through, and that, again, that's how we would present that to you. But no new information relative to that. The numbers, the final numbers, I'm just trying to confirm, we made no amendment or changes whatsoever to any line items or department numbers. So what you saw at first reading is what is contained within the budget for second reading.
Council, I think this is an appropriate time for questions or comments or additional information.
I've gone through it line by line. It's not untypical of what we've had. I just have one question on the revenue. Page 3, there's a technology fee. Is that something new, or is that something that was taken out of something else?
No, sir. When we made the investment last year, remember it was a very large investment, particularly for building and development standards.
Right.
When we implemented that fee at that time, we indicated that one of the ways that we could continue to provide resourcing for updates and upgrades to that system, because it's so expensive, is that we would share that with the users of that. We're more in tune. We would call it a technology fee, but it's more of a convenience fee, because with the implementation of Track It, that system, folks will be able to do everything remotely what they have to come into the office now, and we still do not charge a convenience fee relative to credit card use. And so this is only on plan reviews, permits, those types of things. It does not apply to our taxpayers. It's for the development side. Yes, it is new, but that's where that came from.
Wasn't there a fee for credit card use in there somewhere?
We do not charge a credit card user fee. Correct?
I saw one somewhere on something.
I thought we were absorbing it.
We are currently absorbing them. We approved in last year's budget the implementation of a credit card fee, but the rules from Visa and MasterCard and American Express are that they have to be a convenience fee for transactions occurring across the internet, and most of our transactions are across the counter. So the only place that we are presently taking credit cards across the internet is in the recreation department, and that's a relatively small portion of what we're doing citywide. We have not implemented that fee because we knew that after we passed last year's budget, then we were changing to Civic Rec, which is the software in the recreation department. We're changing to Track It, which is the permitting side for building development standards. Those credit card convenience fees will then be rolled into those as those pieces of software are rolled out. But presently, we're still absorbing credit card fees, and it's to the tune of $75,000 that we're absorbing right now.
You know how you get around that. The trend now is that in our case, we would raise all our fees 3% and give a cash discount. I'm serious. That's what the credit card companies are pushing. The process.
It may be a valid way for us to do that. I mean, we've identified it as a cost of doing business, but it's in our overall, in a $26 million budget, $60,000 or so a year. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, but we've absorbed it as a cost of doing business. But again, because primarily it's been counter transactions. And the reason I guess I was hesitant that I was believing your question was relative, that was new to this year. That's something that was already there. Yes.
The only other question I have is, do we have a handle on what the aid to subdivisions is going to be like this year?
Well, they're finalizing the budget. We believe that the number that we placed as revenue will be accurate for us. It's based on what we were advised that the anticipated budget revenue. Do recall, and this budget reflects it, we continue to reduce that revenue by 10% per year. We then take that revenue, do it as a set aside, and we will only use those resources for non-recurring capital expenses. So we are lessening our dependence on that, but we fight every year to get what is.
Did they end up increasing it or leaving it the same? I never did hear a final word.
There is it is not funded at 100%. You know, I mean, that's always our biggest issue, is it's not funded at 100%. I would have to confirm if there is any increase to what we anticipated, because it is still in conference committee. So as the Senate and the House continue to debate, most of their debate is at higher education, kind of debating what they're going to send back to colleges and universities. This has not, to our knowledge, has not been a contentious issue for conference committee. So we think, again, that we will get the full anticipated amount, not the 100% amount that the legislation indicates should be given to us. So we've only funded at what we anticipated to receive. We do think we'll get that. But we reduce it still by 10% a year. We're probably in our, which year are we doing that?
It's been a while.
Yeah, so I mean, we've reduced our dependence on it by about half.
Yeah. Maybe we could get our legislators to take that money away from higher education and put it into that fund.
They've already taken $1.something billion away from higher education.
And I won't support that.
I got a boy in school, I'm gonna tell you, it's not mine. They don't support much.
Then you need to look at that school's budget. The only other comment I have is on the 2-year budget. I'm not convinced yet. I'm afraid that we've kind of gotten to a more of a baseline budgeting rather than a zero-based budget, which scares me because that's what the federal government does, and it's just automatic more money every year, and it's spending more money every year. The only way that I think I can support it right now is if the next budget is identical to the first budget, and there's no increase.
It's close. We were at, it's within probably 0.25% as a comparison between this budget and the next. It is different. It's not exactly the same, but I'm going to say within about 1/4 to 0.5%. I just don't have the exact number. I don't even have the second year budget in front of me tonight. Right. But we can certainly get that information. but it's within 1/4 to 1/2% as a percent of increase.
Well, with the numbers that David presented, and we continue, I mean, the fund has gone from 35 to 50 something. There comes a point where you got to reward your taxpayers, you know? But I know we have a lot of expenditures coming up, and I don't want to throw a monkey wrench into that, but I think we seriously need to look at that.
I would encourage that if that is our desire moving forward, allow us to get through the projects, assess where we are once we paint all of that, and then determine our path forward. That would certainly be my plea to council to consider that, with so many unknowns that we have out there. We're apprehensive about the second year. We have it, it's balanced, it doesn't require an ad valorem tax increase. We're comfortable with that, but we're a little apprehensive as well, because even in our staff meeting yesterday, you know, we had 1 or 2 department heads who said, do I have a chance to tweak it before it goes to first reading? And we go, well, it's balanced. You know, we have it balanced. If we tweak it at this point, we were really kind of starting that process over. There's been some discussion that says, you know, we've done it. Do we use it as a, maybe a concurrent budget that we just compare to how good we were at it? And then maybe we evaluate it over a year, we say, this is what we projected.
That might be a
and we
good
get
first
to the
step.
end of the year and we go, how well did we project to see that? So we believe it's doable. We're comfortable that it's a budget that we can operate under, but it's going that next step that we haven't done before. So we share that.
What would you do every year from March to June?
I don't know, is David prepared, is David and his staff prepared for year-end budget, first reading, second reading, public hearing, and for an annual report? I would imagine that if all that wasn't on his table at the exact same time, that he could maybe balance that workflow out a little bit. I would imagine, especially Mr. Seifert would appreciate not working a couple of 65-hour weeks.
Council, unless someone wants to entertain a motion to make an amendment, I'm going to offer that I'll entertain a motion to receive the second and final reading of ordinance number 24-2018 for the purpose of discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Floor is open for discussion. Certainly those items within the 2018-2019 fiscal year, but as the door has been opened, I think it's appropriate that we go ahead and continue on somewhat with this discussion in regards to a 2-year budget. I saw some nodding of heads and some yeses and nos and different things as we begin to talk. And certainly, I think it's appropriate for us to give some direction to staff as we go ahead and talk about this. We certainly don't want to steer completely away from the task at hand of discussion with the ordinance before us, but I do think it's of value to us to have some discussion in regards to the 2-year budget. I think there's already been some interesting points made and some valid points made. I would hope that even if we use this year as a gauge to see, kind of how the exercise has gone for our staff, that we would give serious consideration to moving to a 2-year budget. We are getting, in my opinion, to the point that I think it's valid for us to look at that, because many of the departments now, from both a personnel standpoint and an equipment standpoint and a facility standpoint, are often planning beyond the year that we're budgeting for in any regards. And so while we are making arrangements for 2018-19 right now, many of the decisions and many of the things that departments are having to deal with are even beyond that period, and I think it's a worthwhile exercise for our staff. I know it has been a little tough to be introduced to it this first year and to try and think through all the kinds of things that you need to do to be prepared for a 2-year budget. But with our ability to amend or to change that as we work through, I think from my personal standpoint, this may be the year that we want to maybe not officially adopt the second year budget, but to have that as a marker or a guideline to give everybody a little taste of let's play and see how well we played, and then move to that as a way of validating that somewhere in the future. I think it would be an excellent move for us. I think it would help us in terms of our planning and projections, and particularly in regards to some of the issues that we're going to have to address equipment-wise and facility-wise. I think it could be invaluable. And personnel-wise, I mean, looking at the numbers that we saw tonight, it's inevitable that we're going to continue to grow from a personnel standpoint, and that's probably some of the hardest budgeting that we have to do. Certainly the department heads have to do is figure out those manpower needs and how to best address those. So I think all in all, it's a good idea to move towards that. I'm not sensing among council that there's a sense of urgency about doing that, and so what we may want to consider is taking this budget and unless council wants to move forward on it, and I think that we may just use that as a guideline for the next year and see how it works.
Well, I tend to follow with Riley that if you, to your point, that department heads are planning for not only this coming budget cycle, but out beyond that, as they should. And it's almost, I wouldn't say it's a given, but if you say, okay, we're going to, we've seen these revenue increases over the years because of the growth. And, it doesn't take too much of a scientist to figure out that we're probably going to experience growth for the next several years. And then you can extrapolate how much revenue that should be coming to the city. And what that says, what message that can lead to if you're doing 2 years is let's spend it on. I understand we have a lot of projects and we're pouring a lot of money into downtown, but one of the things that I just recently, actually it's when we were debating on that annexation that we took first reading on, and then we didn't do second reading, and then we lost out on a big development. And my question, if you recall, in our discussions was, how does that, if we lose this or if we gain this, how does it affect the average citizen who's been here? And so how does all of the growth benefit the average citizen who's been here all their life, 20 years, 10 years? How does the development in downtown benefit the average citizen? Because obviously these upgrades and the remodeling we're doing on the streets and things like that, it's going to look nice, but obviously it didn't cause the growth because we're just now getting into it. And the growth that we've seen this past year, it's, what is it a result of, and who is it benefiting? We're bringing in all these dollars, and I know at a point, if you don't grow, it's like a business. We're not going to die, but we have to raise the revenue. But, I think that we've got to get to the point where we say, we've got this revenue coming in. We need to give back to our citizens, because the people who've been here for the longest, they're the ones who've been through the bad times as well as the good times. I think we do a great job of being business friendly, and that draws in revenue, but, you know, we set records every year. Wade Hampton cars are bound, you know, that's a big record for sales. Industrial growth, job creation, I mean, we're at the top of the list, I mean, when you compare us to anyone. But how is it benefiting the average Joe? You know, how is it benefiting their bottom line? And this kind of ties into cost of living, and then we've had this conversation before about affordable housing. Well, if we continue to have lots and lots of growth, and we continue to grow the budget because we've got to have more and more and more and more to do the so-called job that we, you know, supposed to be done, then what happens is the cost of living increases. And we haven't increased the ad valorem tax, but what are we doing on stormwater? And the answer is, well, we're getting ready to spend down those accounts, although we've kept a really high balance in them for all these years. Pretty much we've been banking that money. One of the big things we're going to do is downtown. All right, I got that. And the reason we're doing downtown, using stormwater funds for that, is because we can. There's really not any super major problem. We don't have inlets collapsing. We don't have sinkholes happening in downtown. We don't have. So what have we done? We've taken that tax money from everyone, and we're focusing it on a point in the city. Whereas, should we be thinking more in individuals of the city? Because if you look at it, all the money we're going to put in stormwater dollars just here in downtown is not being paid for by revenues generated in downtown. Some of it is, but I would guarantee it's a really small percentage when you look at it citywide. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not convinced the 2-year budget is practical, because I think it allows you to do some planning that it doesn't necessarily tie the hands of the governing body, but it makes you think, well, okay, now we're going to have to get in here, we're going to have to fight, and to say, no, we're not going to hire more people for this department, because, you know, we're just not going to put those individuals out there, and then that can make somebody look bad, and put them in a bad light, especially if it's a public safety department. That's what I have to say about the 2-year budget. And my caution is, we always need to look at the average citizen. I think that's where our focus should be. I mean, what's our budget increasing this year? 8% almost, when you round it up?
From the prior year, we're at 7 point.
I think you round it up, it's close to 8%.
It's close.
And that's a pretty big chunk. And then as far as the budget, I don't have anything I want to change, but I do just have a couple of questions that I thought were kind of odd. The police department had a line item in here for property insurance for $10,000. Why is that charged in the police department, or is there something special that they have to have?
Each department, we assess the insurance for facilities. I'm trying to make sure that if that's a personnel insurance, or is that a...
This is property insurance.
Is it property?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So, do you know specifically, Dave?
I'm sure it's there for a reason. I just want to know why.
That's a very valid question, because
11/5/04/352. It's on page 1938 if you're looking at it.
Okay.
halfway down.
The property insurance lines in general across all departments, we have the insurance policies that we carry on the city that we pay for the policy itself out of 419, which is general government. But if any department employees have accidents that we're having to pay deductibles on, those are charged specifically to the department. So the property insurance lines in each department are to cover the possible accidents, or on average, the accidents that may happen in each department.
Deductibles.
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha. And then I know that every department has building repairs. But what kind of jumped out at me, and this isn't the police department, but they requested $49,000. And of course, it was approved at $21,000. One, is there $49,000 worth of repairs that we're putting off, and is that typical for a building of that age?
They have specific projects that they were wanting to address. When we started shifting dollars to get them in the proper funds, some of them were shifted to other funds, or the project could be possibly being delayed. Without looking into the detail, that's, I'll pull it out if you need.
Well, this would be how do you code, or how do you list renovations?
Some of them are renovations, some of them would be through the repairs line. In that department, there were some very specific repair needs in their HVAC system that are coming up.
That's what I kind of thought about, but I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know if we were kicking something down the road, or if, because that's a pretty significant decrease.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That proposed project was going to be converting what we, in our detention center, converting what we currently use for laundry services and move that to a different part of the jail that currently is basically kind of dead space that's not usable. Take that current laundry room, convert it into a female holding facility, which would dramatically increase the efficiency of and frankly the safety of our detention center. So we're going to probably have to use a different fund to fund that project, because we still want to proceed with it.
Okay, but I guess so. Part of the 49A went to a different line item. Is that right?
The different line items can probably come from our seized funds from our IRS seizures.
To the point being,
Really approved.
we approved that the project is necessary.
No.
We're just moving it to confiscated funds versus.
No, I got that. No, my question was the way it was titled, building repairs. I looked at 49,000, and like, what needs to be repaired, and
It really is renovation.
It's renovation.
okay. That's it.
In the two-year budget, how are new employees going to be addressed for a two-year budget?
We asked departments to project their employee needs in year two as they did in year one. When we were looking at those numbers, there were requests for 10, in this current year, there were requests for 10 full-time and 2 part-time. We've recommended to you in the budget that 7 full-time and 2 part-time be appropriated in this budget. 2 of those 3 transfer into the 2-year budget. And so we've considered those there. And then that would have put that in a request for 10 full-time and 2 part-time in year 2. And in that budget that we would be recommending, if you consider the second-year budget, I am recommending to council that 10 and 2 would be 8 and 2. And so it's one of those that we just don't fund we're just not always able to fund everything that's requested, and so some of that that's not approved in year one rolls over to year two. Some of that's in year two, because we've rolled over some from one to two, we can't fund it all in year two, and so if we did a 3-year budget, you would see some of those roll over to year three. It's, I think our departments do a really good job of not requesting things that they don't need. It's just a matter of timing of when we can afford it. And so it just gets pushed back.
You said you got some hesitation from employee heads. Can you expound on that as to what their thoughts were on the 2-year budgeting process?
Well, in that meeting yesterday, I had one department head said, I'm absolutely for it. I think with what we've appropriated and what they've seen in the 2-year budget, they said, I'm good to go. I'm absolutely ready to go in with year one and year two. Well, I've had at least one other that said, do I have the opportunity that I can make any changes, because as soon as we submitted it and it's approved, the environment is such that I see some changes that I would want to recommend in that. So what I read out of that is that no matter what happens, once we adopt a 1-year budget, we work through the year to make that happen. 2 years makes some folks a little more nervous because it's the unknown. It's what can come up, and anticipating, yes, I can get by with not doing this for a year. I'm not sure I can get by for 2 years if it's not appropriated. I just think there's some anxiety that's there relative to it. My personal opinion is I think this has been a tremendously valuable process for us. I think we will strengthen our process from it, whether we adopt the 2nd-year budget or not. It has been a very valuable process for us. If we adopt the 2nd-year budget, I am comfortable that we can commit to you, short of a downturn in the economy, a recession type experience, which we know what we do in those circumstances. We amend the budget, and we've done that before. We've demonstrated when those revenues aren't there, we make changes to our operating side of things. So it's just a comfort level for folks, I think. This will be the first. And so we've talked about it internally. If council chooses to not go with the 2nd-year budget, that is prepared and is balanced. If you choose not to go that route, we are perfectly fine with that. But as a management tool, I will use that prepared document as we prepare next year's 1-year budget. And departments will be held to a very higher accountability of what they are requesting relative to what they believe would be happening now. That's the only way we'll grow in that process, is that we have to be held accountable for what we believe we would need in year two. By not adopting the 2nd-year budget, we would have wasted their time if we say, we adopted the 1st year, put that on the shelf, next year come back with your new request. We will have to use it as part of that process. And I think at that point, if we were really wrong, next year we would say, we need to stay to 1-year budget. We just would. If we're right on it and where we thought we would be and we're good at it, at that point we would say, yes, we had a high degree of accuracy in projecting out that 2nd year. We are indeed prepared to do that moving forward. Please remember that in any circumstance, we would believe that at some point, with any type of significant change, whether that's a change in strategy or a change in economy, we would have to be prepared to amend that budget at some point anyway. So we don't typically amend our budgets. I think we would have to be more prepared to amend if we adopt the 2nd.
And I think that would be the budget process for us in that 2nd year. We would be amending a budget. I think that
And that
I
may
would
very
be
well be
spending
the
our
case.
time.
Yeah, we don't have the experience to say that we think, yes, that would or wouldn't happen. We feel very comfortable that we can operate over the next 2 years with what we've prepared. But will circumstances change over a 2-year period? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I think we just know that.
I think it'd be good to use it as a testing period to see how they do. I mean, I've gone through 2-year budgets before, so I know how that process works. So I may be a little more comfortable and a little more edgy, but I do know about the changes that can occur when that second year begins to come around on there, so.
Like I said, as we work through this process, what we certainly wanted to demonstrate to council is that we have the ability to do it, and I'm confident that we do. And so it's a matter, at this point, for us, it's a matter of policy of whether or not we would like to proceed with a 1-year or 2-year. We are prepared and are comfortable moving forward in either environment.
Council, other discussion relevant to ordinance number 24-2018?
So you constructed the second year off of historic data?
No, not, well, historic data in the fact that, remember, we do not project growth in our most volatile revenue items.
Then how would you put together a budget in the future like that, other than looking at, this is what it did, this is what it's probably going to do?
Well, we have very modest, and we did not project the historical increases to those line items. So if business license is growing at 8%, 9%, 8%, yeah, then what we probably have between year 1 and year 2 is going to be more in line with half of that, if not even a little less. Yeah, it's even less. You'll see in some of these revenue items in this budget that you're considering under this ordinance, that we already are above now what we are projecting revenue for next year. We're being extremely conservative to those revenue items that are tied to growth in the economy. And that's typically going to be business license that comes from development and fee revenues that come from construction. And so that we try to be extremely, it's about $1.5 million. And so we're not, and that, so why do we have why are we anticipating a $2.5 million increase to fund balance? Because we've reserved $1.5 million conservatively, because we didn't know what would actually occur. If that economy slows down, that $1.5 million is the first hit we take. Not in ad valorem tax relative to property values, assessed values, not the vehicles. Typically, in a slowdown in the economy, immediately not to retail sales, but we are hit drastically by development revenues. And so that's the area that we try to be the absolute most conservative. And then it happens. We roll that into an increase to our fund balance, and it gives you resources to do things going forward. We would not recommend, what we're getting up to, close to 70% of what reserves to budget. 58, 59, we would grow another, 5, 6, 7% going forward. It isn't our belief that we need to have 100% of our anticipated expenses in reserves. Some organizations do. Our policy is 35. And if we want to adjust that going forward, if we think that needs to be higher or lower. But our long-term objective is to keep that close to that 35%. My belief is, once we do our major construction projects, but for council identifying other major construction projects, I think you certainly would then be in an ability to offer relief going forward, because you're just seeing that those dollars are there. I would caution against doing any type of major ad valorem decrease.
because I think, that's really hard to recapture if you need it going in the future. But it certainly gives you the ability to go out and, if you wanted to put $1 million in the road paving, you put $1 million in the road paving. And it gives you the ability to do other things that would impact the average resident and citizen of our community in infrastructure.
So the total revenue you're projecting for the second year budget is the same as the first year, or less or more?
It's not exactly the same. No, it has some growth built into it.
If I remember correctly, it was about 6.5% growth.
Total.
This year was a little over 7,000. So there is some projected growth, but still a conservative projection.
If I'm understanding your point, that your comfort level would be that you would adopt a budget, this year's budget is 26 million, you would adopt the second year budget at 26 million, I would immediately say, I do not recommend a 2-year budget.
I guess I'm still, have memories of when we had to make adjustments before, and I'm hesitant to jump too far out in the future, yeah.
I understand.
I think, one of the interesting things about a 2-year budget, though, is the fact that, and it is counterintuitive, but the more volatile the environment you operate in, oftentimes the better off you are projecting a little bit further out. I mean, in a banking environment, when we don't know what interest rates are going to be, or what changes may take place in the financial environment or whatever, my organization essentially does a rolling budget, so that any of those changes can be absorbed through the process. And so at certain markers during the year, that budget is continually rolling forward.
That's where my comfort is. That's what I do. That's what I've always done.
And so we are never in a 1-year cycle.
But we can't do that as a
Yeah,
public
government's
entity.
totally
We
different.
are required by law to adopt an annual.
Budget.
You can go
understand
to-
that.
But the point is, it's counterintuitive to some degree that a 2-year budget would lock you in or would not be the best way to go. But I think there are advantages to it as well, too.
Well, I guess the only thing that, if you're projecting a 6% increase in the second year budget, you're probably projecting a 4, 5, 6% increase in spending already, right off the bat.
Yes, sir, yes.
You see, that's where my problem
It's
is.
greater than 4.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it was just those personnel costs that we're rolling over from year 1 and requesting year 2, while we can keep our cost to personnel of our overall budget in that 63-64% range, we can maintain that. The overall budget is still going to see a 6.5% increase from 26 million with an additional 6.5%. Yes, I mean, that is what that second budget would contain, is a similar percentage increase from the current year to this next year to the next year. We are projecting that to be a similar increase. Similar increases in revenue, similar increases in expenses. Because we don't see our growth changing that dramatic over that 2-year period. We don't see it stopping, and we don't see it escalating at twice the rate. So we're following that pattern. The longer that period, the greater the risk. I think that's to your point, is we just take more risk the further out we're willing to try to look at that.
Well, not to minimize the work that our financial people do, which is astounding, but the 2-year budget thing, it's kind of sort of what we do already. I mean, you take the template for what you did last year and say, this is going to be here, this is going to be here, this is what it was. I mean, we're just doing it ahead, and then we're going to have to go back and review it.
But while we are not doing it in this environment, when we send the budget workshops to our departments, they are going back and doing zero-based budgeting, because we require them to justify every line item that they're requesting. We're just not reviewing that at this level, but we are requiring that when we start through the budget workshop, part of that process. And so we do it on the revenue side, and they do it on the expense side,
as well. The nice thing is that we not only, the department heads don't just prepare their budget, they go into their departments and they talk to their employees about what are we doing, what do we want to do, what do we need to do. And you'll see line items that will decrease and line items that will increase, and that can be a shift in priority within the department because employees have provided input about recreation, for example. We're seeing great interest in a certain area, so we fund every year where that interest is. We see a declining interest, we eliminate or we decrease our resources into those areas. And we get the best feel for that from our employees who are out there doing that.
So you're saying you're still going to go through that process,
We
even with a
did,
2-year budget?
yes, and we did that in both of the budgets that we have prepared now.
So you've already talked the second-year budget?
Yes.
How can you do that? How can you know April a year from now what you need to know
Well,
today?
theoretically, that would be no different. A 24-month budget is really no different than a 12-month budget if that's your cycle. If you have a 24-month cycle, you're just required to extrapolate that over 24 instead of 12. If we had a 6-month budget and we're trying to go into a 12-month budget, it would be the exact same process.
I understand that, but it sounds like to me that you've already done all your planning for next year's budget.
Yes.
So that,
We've planned 2 years out.
what happens if the Cannon Center burns down and somebody runs
We'll
into
ask you
it?
to amend the budget.
That's what I'm saying.
Thing that burns down in 6 months of a 12-month budget, we're going to come and ask you to amend it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So my belief is that we're going to be back here next year, even if we have a second-year budget prepared, changing that budget.
And you
Because
know-
stuff happens.
And we can't say that that's not what would happen, because we've not done this before.
No, I think the process, however far out you want to plan, but I think that's great. I think that's what you should be doing, because it makes you look at facts and figures and not just, kind of dream that I want this or I want that. But as an elected body, I think that, and I said this earlier, it doesn't tie our hands, but it certainly makes it difficult to go back and amend. It's easier to approve than amend. And so I like the planning part of it. I like the ability to go through it on an annual basis. Because to Riley's point, something 5 months down the road might be different from it is right now. And so instead of going back and having a big debate on amending the budget, we're just, going in, taking what you've already developed and just adjusting that to present to this body.
I do think it's important to know that in no regard, if you choose not to move forward with a 2-year budget, would we perceive that in any way as not valuable time spent. It has been an extremely valuable process for us either way.
Well, let me ask you one other thing. If we went with a 2-year budget and we found ourselves here next year, are you going to have another 2-year budget?
No, I wouldn't bring you a
You're
budget
just going
for
to
2 years.
do 2 years and then start fresh
I would not
after
bring a
that?
budget to council until
We've gone through year 2.
May, June of 2020.
To the administrator's point, I think this has been valuable discussion for us. Let's refocus our efforts on ordinance number 24-2018. Are there any other comments, questions, anything in regards to ordinance 24-2018 council would like to address?
I thought that this is included in there would be the increase in stormwater fee.
It is included,
Yeah. And what was that increase?
from 2160 to 25.
2160 to 25. And there again, it always goes back to my condominium townhouse, that they pay that fee, just like I pay because I got a driveway, right? That they pay for their parking, that they pay on theirs, and then that entire area is taxed again with that stormwater fee. So you pay for this driveway, that driveway yourself, but then it comes into an HOA to cover the entire perimeter. Is that not correct?
The way that the stormwater fee is applied is that an HOA would be charged it on HOA-owned area. In no circumstance is a property charged both times. That does not occur. While I think there are condominium owners who believe that to be the case, and I believe that comes from how the HOA applies the fee. Some HOAs pay their common space area as an expense of the HOA. And it says, if you're going to live in our community, you pay $400 a year, and out of that $400, we do this, and they pay it. Some communities will take the stormwater fee that is assessed to the HOA, and they will take a percentage of that, and they will charge it to every owner in the community. I believe it is those folks who believe that they are being charged twice. But it's because of how the HOA recoups that cost as an expense to them. That is my belief, because when we've gone in and we've looked at, do we charge, because we do it by parcel. So we only charge it by a tax map number.
Yeah,
and a property, you can't have two owners of the same tax map number.
Right. But I think that with the, Brookside Towns, they basically have a driveway back. A lot of your condominiums have driveways. They got parking spaces allowed to them on their asphalt. And so then when you look at what the tax records show, or what's billed to them, the 2160, and then you look at what the HOA, it takes the acreage that's there. And that is included. All that's gathered in. So there again, to me, and I'm sorry if I'm hard-headed about this or something, but to me, I can see your townhomes that have garages and an actual driveway that you pull into, okay? That they take their common area. But like Riverside Towns, they don't have a driveway of their own. Hammett Farms does not have a driveway on their own. They've all just got little parking spaces. Your side, this space, and this space, but it's all part of the asphalt.
So in a townhome environment, they own the land under their unit.
Right.
They own that land. And they are paying an ERU, that 2160 is being paid for that parcel that they own, that they sit on. That larger area that the HOA pays on, those parcels are excluded. When we calculate that land area is subtracted. Everywhere. That is how the process, when we calculate the area, we have to exclude that, because again, a tax map number is only going to be identified to single owner. Either the HOA owns it, or the individual property owner owns it, but they can't both own it. And so, when we charge that to the HOA, it's going to be for, if it's a private road, it includes the private road. If it's the driveways that are under the HOA, anything that is under their land area, that's what's being charged to the HOA. Some choose to pay it as an expense of the community. Some others choose to charge it back to each individual property owner. And that's what we typically find gets folks most confused, is that their HOA sends them a bill for their proportionate share in it. But it wouldn't be 2160 two times.
Others? Have a motion and a second. Any other comments before we conclude the discussion on ordinance 24-2018? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert, Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, we'll move to items of new business, the first of which is a request by Councilmember Albert in regards to supplemental road paving.
Okay. Thank you. If y'all recall back, towards the end of last year, Mr. Grant, the engineer, he came before us with some streets over in my district that have very severe cracks. We're not talking about spider cracks going here and there and all that. These are cracks going across the road that at some points are 2-3 inches wide. And the residents have expressed concern of these with their kids, riding their bicycles, out walking, people tripping, scooters, what have you. So I don't think that it's in our funds, but I'm hoping that we could come up with a place where we could take funds. We set aside funds when Mr. Grant came before us for Brushy Meadows and St. James Place. We also have issues in Sheldon Farms, and they've got some pretty big issues out there with these cracks in the road. And not sure exactly where these, whether it was the material that was used or if it was the time of day that it was put in or whatever. I don't know. But they do have some serious issues out there, and they have asked us to address those. Also in Riverside Chase, there is some issues there as well. And like I say, they're not the spider veins, they're not the regular skipper checked them out as well. They're not the ones that we can go out and put tar in and fill them up. They take special directions on that. Steve could probably tell you what it would take on those. But
Are those roads on the paving list? And where do they fall on the paving list?
I don't know that they're on there. The roads, and I think that, from what Mr. Grant had told us when he presented this to us for me towards the end of last year, that it would actually save in the paving by fixing most of these cracks. Is that not right?
Yes, ma'am.
Help.
We're working towards integrating some preventive maintenance into the overall plan. So next year we'll have more money proposed, I hope, for preventive maintenance. But to answer your question, no, those roads are rated very high in condition-wise, so they're very low on the priority list. It is interesting to note that if you look between the cracks, the roads are in very good condition. But the isolated cracks every 100 to 200 feet, like she said, in my belief, it's some kind of mix they had. And if you think about it, most of these subdivisions, I think, are approximately the same age, 15 to 20 years old. So my best guess is the mix they were using 15 to 20 years ago is, for some reason, over time, it's just contracted and cracked every 100 to 200 feet. So I don't think it's a contractor issue. I think it's just a mixed design issue that's just now making itself known. So, like I said, in between the cracks, the road's in very good condition. There's no potholes or anything like that. The subgrades are all very good, but the cracks are just 100 to 200 feet. You can almost wheel it off and guess where the next one will be. So,
Is it a truly a safety issue? I mean, is it?
I guess if you had a walking cane or something like that, or high heels and walking down through there, yeah, a high heel could go down in one of those cracks.
What do you think about a scooter or a ride?
Yeah.
Well,
or a skateboard.
is the elevation on each side changed, or is it just separated?
Just separated in most cases.
So it's been a contraction.
Yes, sir.
But you say the
And some of
subgrade under is fine.
Right, we dug a test one up, and the subgrade was great, but the actual asphalt was cracked all the way to the subgrade. It was like this. It was, I mean, we had some DOT guys been doing it for 30 plus years. They said they'd never seen anything like it. So we can just attribute it to the mix that was used at that time. It wasn't a contractor issue, we don't think.
Do we have, so this is relatively isolated in terms of these cracks, particular cracks?
It just seems to be in these subdivisions that are, I mean, we haven't noticed it on any, just downtown streets or anything like that. It's just in these subdivisions that are approximately the same age, if you think about it.
Well, speaking of the downtown area, I'm gonna share some of these pictures that I took this afternoon. And I'm sorry I don't have copies, I'll give these to you here in just a second. But I assumed that we were gonna be talking about asphalt or paving situations. How do we figure in, how do we rate roads that are cracking? Because I have got roads, this is an easy walk around my house. I know for a fact there has been no paving in at least 50 years in this area. We've got cracks, as you will see in these first 2 or 3 pictures, that run the whole length of some streets and to both sides, that have anywhere from 3 to 4 inches to nearly a foot of grass in them growing. We've got some in the street that I live on that is now 110 years old and hasn't been repaired, that run all the way from side to side, and it looks like occasionally somebody will mow part of the street where that's coming up.
And what street was this?
Davenport in Arlington.
Yeah, your street.
Yeah,
Is that the one that's the
I didn't
historic
drop my
street?
glasses in that one. That's how thick that crack is where the
Is
change
that the
is.
historic
It's-
street that has the different markings and all that stuff in it
Yeah,
in the past? Yeah.
yeah. Got a nice little plant growing in the street right there. Looks to be some sort of iris or maybe a cactus plant growing out in the street. And I don't guess it rated, but we've got some where this last one, Church Street, that's actually down to the dirt. It's been paved twice, but we're down to the mud.
Is that concrete or is that mud?
That's asphalt underneath there.
That's asphalt?
That's Arlington. It's been paved twice at some point in time. But that's the
Are
one
they not
that,
on the paving list, if they're in that bad
they
shape?
didn't make it.
They didn't make the paving list?
No, ma'am.
When our paving list is supposed to be,
Well, the paving list was the one where that, equipment went out and measured, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
the paving list is supposed to rate all roads based on their condition, right?
Correct.
And the way we started this many years ago is try to take the politics out of it and say you did the worst first. And then you go down the list as far as the money goes. So are we not following that? Is that what's going on?
Well, I understand Judy's point, and I was being a little bit facetious in terms of these pictures because, you know, it's bad, but I mean, I know that it's gonna make the list at some point in time. I think to your point, the reason, or one of the reasons that we went to the third-party vendor and the worst first kind of thing was, number one, to take the political piece out of it that we struggled with for so many years about where the money went and who got the money and that sort of thing, but also to be objective and subjective in how we addressed these kinds of issues. And so consequently, I think the problem, and the problem that I would have supporting making an allocation to address a specific problem outside that list would be the fact that it sort of opens Pandora's box. And while these cracks may be substantial, are they any worse than what we've seen or what other council members could produce by walking around in their district? And so
That's exactly right.
I think that's my biggest hang-up is if we start doing one-offs, where does it end?
Well, going back to the budget, how much, I looked at, on the revenue side, paving?
We increased it by 250,000, so we're now at 600.
Yeah, I mean, we bumped it up a lot.
We bumped it up 250,000 this year.
Well, and that
That's
was
not
to
gonna cover
address
much.
some of these issues that we've been
Right.
talking about, is this preventative maintenance program that we don't have now, but we'll be addressing in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I understand every crack or pothole can be a safety issue. Because I know back before they fixed a lot of I-85, we blew 2 truck tires different times, and that cost us lots of money. And, but, you know, there was, eventually they got to it, and it was how the money is spent. And I'm afraid, like you said, if you do pull resources to go somewhere else, then you're ushering back in that political element that can contaminate the process.
And I don't think we ought to marginalize or minimize the fact that, you know, that the roads are cracking and there's potential hazard there.
Yeah.
You know, on the other hand, I think about the fact that we've got places that have really serious problems. I mean, when we're down to the dirt in places, we've got an issue. And when we got neighborhoods that have substandard roads for whatever reason, you know, to your comment, and to Riley's comment a minute ago about sort of spreading wealth, I mean, we've got to be cognizant of the fact that we've got communities all over the city that have substandard and roads that need repair. And I think the best way to approach that is what we've done with worst to first kind of thing.
How often is the assessment on the roads done in the city?
Every 4 years.
4 years, so there could be a lot of damage done in between assessments, but nothing's going to move during that 4 years as far as on the list.
Nothing's going to move. And the citizens, though, they will still continue to say something about their roads. Because we dealt with my subdivisions for 5 years. So I definitely think if there's something we can do to make it move faster, we need to make it move faster.
Dollars.
Well,
Well, I mean, we started that I don't know how many years ago, but we were on the matching funds, I believe, at one time. And then we began to take money from the general fund, putting it in our paving fund.
right.
And so, and I don't want to get off track, but if you take sidewalks as well, we've got sidewalks in my district that are crumbling. And then recently they came in and they replaced the sidewalks. But, you know, it's where do we want to cut 7 positions out that we're creating and pave roads?
Or amend the budget. But then we got money everywhere, don't we? We have it everywhere.
I hate to pass one in the future.
I know, right?
Well,
That was the reason I asked about the unfunded balance. I thought we might be able to fund it over this way to the streets, but, yeah.
It is a temptation. I mean, but I think the problem that we have when we,
But I really can't see that if this street is down to dirt, that you say, why that robot or type equipment, why it could not detect that?
I believe it's detected. I'm just not sure how the calculations came into the score, how the cracks, what weight they carried into the overall condition of the road.
Well, I walked this road when we did the walk, and it was,
This
I know
afternoon.
Rick pointed out many things that were, from long years ago by, that you might see in this road. So I thought maybe that the, community had decided to keep it as a historic. Right, to keep it like that, to keep it
George
in
Washington
the
Red.
train of the neighborhood, with
So
all
since 3 of these have
the
come up in
mementos
this-
and stuff in the surrounding area there.
Well, Skipper, don't you do some patching just to kind of get us by until it does get to the list?
Yes, he
But you looked
does.
at that, didn't you, Skipper, and that wasn't your patch, right? The patches that you had seen, where those cracks were done, you could not do that.
When you're talking about crack sales, when you talk about the last on patch,
Yeah.
you know, we tried a whole bunch of stuff and shelter and just not material that I can find with shell out here that is heavy enough material to fill a crack. You know, that's
down through Shelter Farms, and those cracks,
But they are level.
yeah, they're just wide.
Steve, would crack seal be effective on something that's not ones that wide? What really, I mean, crack seal is only to what width? I mean, effective? Probably ½ inch. Anything over a ½ inch seal isn't really effective. Not really, it won't stand up.
So what is the fix for this road?
For that patching is best. Cut it out.
So you cut it,
Yeah, cut it.
patch it?
That's what we're gonna do in St. James Place and, Budget Creek. And the smaller cracks that are ½ inch, they will be crack sealed. And we'll be implementing more of that as we go forward. Like I said, get more money in the budget, and we can, and like I said, since this is the third time this has come up in the past year, I emailed the vendor today to try to better understand how cracks weigh into the formula they use to give the score. So hopefully I'll be able to maybe ascertain the amount of cracking as we look at the scores as well in the future. So that's to be determined.
I know our older streets out there, you know, in Brushy Meadows, they, you know, they're just down to the bottom too. Not all of them, because I know they came in and did Brushy Meadows Drive and stuff, but they don't have, the older streets don't have the cracks like the newer streets back down in the, you know, back part of the subdivision. Of course, it was done by a different developer, different time, you know, different year.
Ms. Albert, the floor is yours. If you would like to make a motion, we can go from there. If you'd like to continue to work with staff to address that, we can move on to the next item. I'll leave that up to you.
Well, I would like to know if there is a fund that we might be able to take money from or set aside, like stormwater. I mean, you know, we got.
I can't use stormwater for paving.
You can't do stormwater.
I can't use the stormwater fund to make it do paving. Right. But I mean, David's reported, Mr. Slackard's reported this evening that we know that we're going to finish, we feel confident we're going to finish this year with more revenues than we're going to have expenses. We know that. The ability to fund your request has never been our issue, and I think I communicated that it wasn't a matter of that. For me, and our conversation of bringing it to the full council was because it would indeed change how we are approaching road paving and the distribution of those dollars throughout all districts of the city. That's why I felt it was very important for the full council to consider. So, do we have the resources that we could move dollars? Shelter Farms, we're estimating that if we were to specifically do that project, it would require about $40,000 to $50,000 to go in to do that work. That's not necessarily, again, Steve, that's not crack sealing, that's doing full depth patch repair and replacement. To fix it, I mean, we don't want to just go out and put tar in a hole that won't do anything to it.
Is that repaving?
That is patching. That is patching. That is not a full
Those are roads
of those roads.
with their age, you know.
And so it would be different, and my concern was that while you could have one or two or three that really need that in your district, my concern was that that may be the case in District 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as well, and I needed to follow what we have in place. So to come to council and ask for additional resources, I can certainly report to you that if you are inquiring, do we have $40,000 or $50,000 that could be transferred to road paving? Yes. Maybe not out of a single fund, but we are going to be under expenditure by that amount and greater. And so, do we have the ability to do it? Yes, we have the ability to do it. My concern was the policy of worst first and the council approving paving list. This was not on that list, and I was not comfortable in moving something that was not on the list top to the top.
Right.
And that's a policy concern that I had relative to how council has approached road paving.
Yes, and my point was, it's not the $50,000, it's, do we have $300,000 to $500,000? Because if we're gonna spend 50 in one district, I've got a dozen streets that I want.
Mayor's got his own street.
I've been holding off on that thing for 20 years, sooner or later.
No, I'll put mine on there.
You got company.
Proud of the streets.
Hey, I'm not
You
saying,
told us the history.
yeah, no, all I'm saying is let's fix it, you know?
Any idea what the worst street in her district is now that would be near the top of the list? Maybe she could substitute.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can have to do about 9 or 1.
Well, maybe that would be the way to do it. Say, okay, well, let's not do Joe Blow Lane. I want to substitute this one
But I
instead.
believe, well, I have to look at the list, but I believe there's 1 or 2 more streets in my district for that, but I'm not sure. I can look, but I can get it to you. We do know where all the streets are. Some streets are in more than one district, just because they pass through from one district to the other. I can assure you that we as staff do not rate your streets based on district location. We follow the worst first off the scoring system, but when they are close, we do know that we need to distribute that among districts within the city as well. And so that's the reason we give you a list greater than the amount of resources we have to do, because it is council's discretion whether or not to jockey any of those. So we give you more than there are dollars to do, with a recommendation that this is worst first. And that has been the policy that we've applied for a number of years, because as staff, we would be very uncomfortable, and you would not be the only one to do this, but we would be uncomfortable in our process if we were to say, we have 6 districts and 1 at large, that's 7, if we're going to put $700,000, each of you get $100,000, tell us where you want in your district. We've never done that here. Some places do that. We've never done that here. And so that means that a district may get $300,000 or $400,000 for paving because the worst streets are in that district, and another district may get none or 50,000. We have never distributed those dollars based on districts, because that's been the policy of council not to do that.
And the streets are in order according to the way the machine read them out, as to what gauge or whatever they were, yeah.
And road conditions can change from one year to the next. I mean, a road that was 10th on the list over a year can get substantially worse, and it may move from 10th to 2nd, 3rd, or 1st, simply because heavier traffic, more use. Things can change that from year to year, but once you adopt the list, we allocate those resources to that list until those dollars are all spent.
So right now, we have a 4-year list,
No, it's really 2-year list.
2-year list, oh, okay.
Yeah, we really, yeah.
Now, will the equipment come and go back out again, or?
If council chooses to approve us doing it in 2 more years, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And it's our intent to request to do it in 2 more years.
And that list, isn't it on the internet somewhere?
Not yet, but that's one of the things I want to do once we get track of it going.
Yeah, where we'd be able to pull it out and see where what's on there, yeah.
But we do have folks that will call us and ask, and they'll say, well, I understand council approved the road paving list, what is it? And we pull it out of our minutes and say, here it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just used it to email to the citizens on a monthly basis to let them know it was still there, because they're going to call you about it.
Okay, well, I guess that, in order, I would like to make a motion. I would like to make a motion that we set aside $45,000 to $50,000 to, correct the streets in the Shelburne Farms and, whatever can be used for roadside checks.
Have a motion, do I hear a second? I have a motion. Do we have a second? Not hearing one. It'll fail.
Second.
We'll talk about it some more later. It does fail by the lack of a second. We'll move on then to the first reading of ordinance number 26-2018. This is an ordinance to amend Article 4, Stormwater Management Fee, Section 284, Fees in the City of Greer Code of Ordinances.
We intentionally placed this item after the budget. This is simply to clean up the stormwater. The stormwater budget, when it was originally adopted, set the fee rate. It was an ERU of 2160. This ordinance removes that amount from the ordinance and places it that the fee is as established by the comprehensive fee schedule. And so we don't have, that way we don't have a reference in two different places of code what that rate would be.
Entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
And second. Floor is open for discussion.
Is there, what, is the stormwater being paid for? When a developer goes in and puts in a subdivision, does he not pay for the stormwater? I mean, to make it?
He built it.
He built it himself, out of his funds?
Correct.
Okay. And then if an HOA is there, then they, as we did, they have to go in and have it cleaned out and do what needs to be done.
Relative to ponds and those types of things, yes, ma'am.
So what other sources does the stormwater fee, I mean, what is that?
What
I think
do we spend
stormwater,
money on?
I'm thinking of stormwater.
Yeah.
Does
Mr.
that-
Barrett, would you like to give some examples of projects and the expenditures of stormwater? Remember, stormwater is not only remediation of stormwater problems. We are required under EPA and DHEC, under our MS4 permit, that we have to have a stormwater program. The stormwater program is about water quality, not water quantity. And I think we've discussed that over the years, and I think we have a good comprehension of that. There are best practices that we're required to do under our permit. There's sorts of public education we're required to do under our permit. But we do also appropriate resources for stormwater projects. Mr. Mayor, if you could give some examples of what those are.
Like Mr. Greer says, it does, a lot of it pays for the program itself, keeping, complying with the DHEC laws, et cetera, plan review, inspections that are required, all that stuff. But it also funds projects that come up. We don't have like we've got an assessment of all our roads, we don't really have an assessment of all the storm drainage in the city. So usually we learn about a problem when it surfaces, for lack of a better term. But just a good example is Mary Street. I think we had a complaint on Mary Street a few months ago, and Skipper went out and investigated and found out there's a small pothole in the side of the road out there, and he sent the camera down, and we have, the pipe is badly misaligned. I suspect there was a water line break. There's a cut nearby. I suspect there was a water line break in the past, and the subgrade got wet when they repaired it, and the pipe is sunk, so it's not working. It's not flowing properly. So I asked Mr. Riggers, we have another contractor in town working on Wildwood, which we came to you a month or so ago. I'm probably going to request emergency funding in the next few weeks. I'm supposed to meet with that contractor on Mary Street this week and get a cost estimate from him to open up 60 to 70 feet of Mary Street and relay this pipe back in proper alignment. So when these things pop up out of nowhere, that's our funding source to remedy those.
We used our stormwater fund to build the pond at City Park when that was originally done, because again, that's one of those, no matter which fund you pay it out of, the taxpayers of the city end up paying for that. But we use those resources to do stormwater management on this site when we built this site. I've asked Mr. Seifert to pull the stormwater budget itself to reflect where the total revenue and expenditure and how those expenditures are identified.
Referencing the stormwater budget for the fiscal year that we just passed, we're anticipating fees of about $910,000. Of that, about $460,000 will be covering salaries and equipment costs and debt service for the equipment needed to help run that program. As Mr. Grant, alluded to, there are the inspections that are done daily that are required of all the construction projects and ongoing projects, as well as at one of our own sites down at Buncombe Street. Anytime it rains, we're supposed to have a water quality check, so we have contractors going out there checking water quality runoff. So we have the contracts that are covered there. Then the MS4 permit does require certain aspects that we're required to do as part of the program, which is public education and outreach and materials and supplies to do that. Then we have our own vehicle costs, travel meetings, and then contractor costs, plan review costs as well. And then the balance of that for the fiscal year 19, $332,000 is being set aside for remediation. So all of that is rolled into the whole stormwater program. It's not really construction, because as you were saying, those are handled by the contractors. But once those systems are built and we inherit them, much like roads, we have to go fix them when they break. So, as Mr. Grant was talking about, a storm drain collapses, we have to go fix it. Once we take ownership of it, we have to maintain it.
Street sweeper's probably part of stormwater.
The flood thing.
The truck that blows out those pipes and sucks stuff out of them, and that's part of that. And we got 100 tons of stuff out of those pipes last year or something. A lot of stuff that's behind the scenes sometimes. Others in regards to ordinance number 26, 2018. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Earwood,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert, Mayor Danner.
Yes. Any items for executive session, Mr. Greer?
No, sir.
With that, we stand adjourned.